You're listening to 105.3, The Gerblin, Dominaria's #1 music source for generic goblin noise.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Welcome back to the 4th installment of my Saturday games for December. I hope you guys are having a happy holidays, and if you're not celebrating, I just hope you're having a great day. In today's game, I'm playing my Karador deck, keeping Phyrexian Tower, Path to Exile, Sun Titan, Swamp, Command Tower, and Wood Elves. One of my good friends Tim is playing Daretti and keeps a Thought Vessel, Unwinding Clock, Junk Diver, Perforos, 2 Mountains, and Ghost Quarter. This is a bit of an old game as Jameson still has his Narset deck, and he keeps part the Water Veil, Reverberate, Pact of Negation, Mystic Gate, Glacial Fortress, and a Plains. Lastly, Fred 2 is playing his Ghalta deck, keeping Berserk, Surak the Huntcaller, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, 2 Forests, Homeward Path, and Dragonthrone of Tarkir. Jameson wins the die roll, and he starts us off. Jameson plays a Mystic Gate, and passes. Fred plays a Forest, and passes to Tim. Tim plays a Mountain, passing to me. I play a Windswept Heath, and I pass. Jameson plays a Tap Sulphur Falls, passing. Fred plays a Forest, and he also passes. Tim plays an Urza's Power Plant, and then pays 2 to cast a Thought Vessel. I play a Plains, and I pass. At the end of my turn, I crack my Heath, and I go and find an Overgrown Tomb, having it come in tapped. Jameson plays a Plains as well, and he casts a Long-Term Plans in his main phase. He goes and tutors for a card, putting it 3rd from the top. Fred plays a Forest, and he casts a Lifecrafter's Bestiary. Tim plays a Mountain, and paying 4, brings out Daretti. He then upticks his Planeswalker, discarding 2 and drawing 2. I draw, and I play a Command Tower. I then tap out to cast Wood Elves, and I get to go find a Forest card. I find a Savannah, putting it on the field untapped, and I pass. Jameson plays a Glacial Fortress, which comes into play untapped, and he casts a Primal Amulet. He then passes to Fred. Fred scries and bottoms the card, and then plays a Forest in his main phase. He casts Surak the Huntcaller, but is unable to pay the 1 for the Bestiary trigger. With nothing else, Fred passes. Tim draws, and he plays a Mountain. We see a Voltaic Key hit the field, and then a Junk Diver afterwards. Tim then upticks Daretti, discarding 2 and drawing 2. I draw, and I play a Phyrexian Tower as my land for turn. I then tap out, using my tower to sacrifice my Wood Elves, and I pay 6 mana for my Sun Titan. With the Sun Titan entering, I bring back my Wood Elves, and this time I get to go and find Canopy Vista. With nothing else, I pass. Jameson draws for turn, and he has nothing to play, so he passes to Fred. Fred scries and keeps the card on top. He plays a Forest as his land for turn, no surprise there, and he casts Primordial Hydra where X is 2. This leaves him 1 mana to pay for the Bestiary trigger, and he draws a card. Fred then moves to combat and swings Surak at Daretti. Tim blocks the Junk Diver, who, upon dying, lets Tim return the Unwinding Clock to his hand. With nothing else, Fred passes. Tim draws and plays an Urza's Tower as his land for turn, having assembled 2/3 of Tron. He then upticks Daretti, discarding 2 again and drawing 2 more. Tim then casts a Mind Stone, and then drops a Mirror Retriever before passing to me. I play a Swamp for my turn, and I cast Swords to Plowshares on Tim's Mirror Retriever, clearing the way for my Sun Titan to smack Daretti. I move to combat, and I swing Sun Titan at Daretti and Wood Elves at Jameson. Before damage is dealt, Jameson casts Deflecting Palms to have me take 1 from the Wood Elves, and he gains a counter on his amulet. I also remember to bring something back with my Sun Titan trigger, and the Heath hits the field once more. I then crack the Heath again in my second main phase, taking 1 to go and find a Scrubland. I decide to take 2 and pay 3 mana for Birthing Pod instead of its normal mana cost, and I then activate the pod to sacrifice Sun Titan and go and find a 7-drop. I'll give you one hint as to what I'm going to find, and it rhymes with Smellish Norn. With Ellish Norn hitting the field, I effectively neuter Jameson's Narset, and I have the upside of killing Fred's Hydra. Having done more than enough for my turn, I pass to Jameson. Jameson draws for turn and casts Mana Vault. He then taps out to cast Part the Water Veil and takes an extra turn. On Jameson's extra turn, he takes 1 from the tap vault and plays a Plains as his land for turn. That's all she wrote though, and Jameson sadly has to pass. Fred scries and leaves the card on top. He plays a homeward path to his land for turn, and he suspends Search for Tomorrow. Fred then casts a Golden Guardian and moves to combat. He decides to finish off Daretti, and he swings Surak at the Planeswalker for his final 3 loyalty counters. Tim draws for turn, and Jameson proposes that Tim help him untap the Mana Vault so that Jameson can help him. Tim doesn't fall for this though, and he sacrifices the Mind Stone to draw a card. Tim then plays a Seagate Wreckage as a land for turn, and paying 5 mana casts Mirrorworks. He then passes. I draw for turn and cast a Birds of Paradise. I then activate my Birthing Pod, taking 2 life and paying only 1 mana, and sacrifice the birds to go and find a Hermit Druid. I then move to combat, swinging the Wood Elves at Jameson for 3, and Elesh Norn at Fred for 4. I then pass. Jameson loses 1 life from the Vault trigger, but he doesn't stop there. He plays a Hallowed Fountain as his land for turn, having it come in untapped, and loses 2 more life. It is a resource after all, and with nothing else, he passed to Fred. Fred removes a counter from his search, and then scries and bottoms the card. In his main phase, we see Circle of the Elders hit the field on Fred's side of the board. He then moves to combat, and swings Surak at Jameson, who casts a Teferi's Protection before damage is done for 2, gaining another counter on his amulet. With his combat step effectively fogged, Fred then passes to Tim. Tim draws for turn, and paying 4, casts Perforos in his main phase. That's it, that's all, and he passes. I draw and play a Force as my land for turn, and then activate the Hermit Druid in my main phase, and I begin to mill until I hit a basic. I go deep, like really deep, until I find one, binning the rest of my cards. I then pay 3 to cast Karador since there are more than enough creatures to reduce his cost. Jameson is ready though, and counters it with a Pact of Negation because he's still unhappy with Elesh Norn being out. Moving to combat, I swing the Elves and Elesh at Tim for 7. In my post-combat main phase, I activate my Birthing Pod, sacrificing my Wood Elves to go and find Mind Slicer, and I then pass to Jameson. Jameson faces back in and loses 1 from his tap Mana Vault. He has to pay the upkeep cost for the Pact, and draws for turn. He plays an untapped Sacred Foundry, losing 2 more life, and passing to Fred. Fred removes the final counter on a suspended search, and he goes to find a basic. He then scries and keeps it on top. At the end of his draw step, I sacrifice my Mind Slicer to the Phyrexian Tower for 2 black mana. This forces all of us to discard our hands, and with the trigger on the stack, Tim flashes in Dualcaster Mage rather than lose it. With the Mage on the stack, I use Path to Exile to target Surak, and Jameson uses his Reverberate in hand to copy it and target my Elesh Norn. Fred also takes the chance to use his Heroic Intervention before losing it as well, and he protects his board while I somehow manage coming out on the bottom, with my Elesh Norn being exiled and finding a basic. Unfortunately, with Elesh Norn dead, Fred is suddenly able to cast Ghalta for significantly less colorless in his main phase, only needing to pay 2 green, and he pays the 1 for the Bestiary trigger, drawing. I should also mention that with Reverberate resolving, Jameson is able to flip his Primal Amulet into Primal Wellspring. Fred then activates his Golden Guardian, and has it fight Ghalta, and gets to transform the Golem to reveal a Goldforge Garrison. Fred then taps the Garrison to cast an Ulvenwald Tracker. We then move to Fred's combat step, and Surak gives Ghalta haste, who in turn gives me 12 points of commander damage. Fred also swings the Elder at Tim for 3, and Surak at Jameson for 5. Fred also points out as we move to his end step that I could have taken much more commander damage, as until a few minutes ago, he still had Berserk in his hand. Tim draws for turn and counts up his mana. He pays 5 to cast a Precursor Golem, and using the Mirrorworks trigger, pays to make a copy of it. This gives him 6 bodies hitting the field, and therefore 6 Perforos triggers, dealing 12 to all of his opponents. With nothing else, Tim passes turn. I draw for turn, and unhappy with what I draw, activate the Hermit Druid in my main phase to find an answer for Fred and Tim's board states. I begin to mill, and as we get deeper and deeper, start to realize I might have hit all of my basics already. I was almost right, as I place my library into my graveyard, except for the last card, which was my last forest. Whoops. I have to win on this turn now, and I play a Force as my land for turn. I recast Karador for only 3, as I certainly have enough to reduce the cost to only 1 white, 1 black, and 1 green. Looking through my graveyard, I sadly realize I probably need at least 1 more turn to figure out how to win. I decide to cast a Fiend Hunter, and then target Ghalta. Fred is so confident he doesn't even put it back to the command zone, and happily flips Ghalta to represent that he's exiled with the Hunter. With nothing else, I pass to Jameson. Jameson untaps and takes 1 from the Vault trigger. He plays a Temple of the False God as his land for turn, and we finally see Narset hit the field. He isn't able to give her haste or anything though, and he passes to Fred. Fred scries and keeps the card on top, drawing it. He activates his tracker in his main phase, and has Surak fight my Fiend Hunter, which kills it, and Ghalta triumphantly returns. Fred then taps his Circle of Elders and some lands to cast a Void Winnower, which isn't super great. We then move to combat, and Ghalta plus Surak say hello to Jameson to take him out. Tim draws for turn, and he plays an Inventor's Fair. He cracks the fair and goes to find an answer to Fred's board if he can. He grabs Rings of Brighthearth, which I'm not sure will do it, but it's what he picked. Tim then casts it and passes to me. I attempt to draw for turn, and failing to do so, lose the game. Fred untaps and scries for turn, bottoming the card. He then taps enough mana to cast and equip the Hedron Matrix onto his Ghalta. Fred then activates the tracker to have his Void Winnower fight the Precursor Golem, and he moves to combat, swinging Ghalta at Tim. Tim blocks with what he can, since the tokens can't, and takes 19 commander damage, passing to Tim. Tim then draws, and with no way to make more blockers or wipes the board, knows he's dead on Fred's next attack step, and concedes to Fred. Game review time. So, today's game perfectly highlights why you always need to make sure how many basics you have in your library when activating Hermit Druid. As I mentioned earlier, this was a bit of an older game, and thankfully we now have cards like Underrealm Lich, which I can put in my Karador deck, so that milling myself out doesn't happen. I say it's unfortunate for Jameson, but he wasn't able to do anything, but in reality, playing against Narset can sometimes be a bit of a downer. He'd built the deck with a ton of extra turns and extra combat steps, and basically if he was able to start going to attack steps, he would have gone off and won the game. So we're in a bit of an odd position, because on the one hand I'm happy he didn't do very much, and on the other hand it's disappointing because he didn't really get to play the game. Fred's Ghalta deck, however, did get to play the game, and he got to smash a lot of face. I just wish I was able to play it as well as he did the time that I borrowed it and played it on camera. Thanks a lot, Fred. Tim and I were talking on our way home after the game, and he came to the conclusion that he thinks he could have won on the turn that he tutored for the Rings of Brighthearth. He didn't have a ton of mana, but he could have used some of it to pump his creatures with Perforos' secondary ability, the one that people forget about. Now don't quote me on this, as I'm not a math wizard, but I think if he'd done that, he probably would have had enough damage to take out Fred, even if Fred had blocked creatures. Hindsight is unfortunately 20/20, but I do think it's important to look back on your old games and see for ways to improve. Just be sure to be kind to yourself when you find ways you could have won in the end, and didn't. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.